the fortunes child. So listen, world, you can't ignore my song that longs to be.
Welcome, everyone. We're so thrilled to have you here with us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. I know we have folks joining in from all over, so thanks for being here. My name is Danielle. I'm the CEO of Women Talk Design, and we're, as I said, just so thrilled to have you all here today for a very special event. This is the first time we're holding this event. It's called Apply to Speak, Getting Your Questions Answered about the CFP process. Before we dive in, I do want to share that we have live automated captioning by Otter AI today. And so if you would like to follow along, I just dropped that link in the chat. You'll also see at the top of the page, if you see live streaming with Otter AI, you can click on that. It's imperfect because it is automated, but an option for you to follow along there. And for those of you who are new to Women Talk Design, welcome. Just a kind of brief overview of what we do. Our larger mission is to help see a more diverse group of speakers on stage at conferences and events, and even speaking up in meetings. And so we do a couple of things along those lines. We have a speaker directory with a little over 600 speakers from around the world, speaking on topics within design and tech at large. We work with event organizers to provide resources on how to design inclusive conferences that our speakers want to be a part of. And then finally, we host a lot of different events and trainings, now all online, to help inspire more folks to start speaking and provide them with the tools and confidence to do so, and then to give them opportunities to practice. So we've heard a lot from folks in our community that they want to know more about the CFP process, the call for proposals. And so we're put together this event, thanks to Saaniya and Tenessa, to be able to just have your questions answered from event organizers. And so the way that we're going to kind of structure our afternoon today is that we're going to start off, I have some questions to get us kicked off for our event organizers. And then we're gonna have a lot of time for Q&A. So I really encourage you to start thinking about what are the questions I have about the CFP process, what holds me back, what's something I've been wondering about. And then at the end, we're actually saving the last 20 minutes for y'all to start to chat with one another. So we're going to set up breakout rooms, and I have a couple of prompts for you to share with other folks that are attending. You can ask for input on a talk idea that you're working on, or maybe you're feeling stuck on your abstract or want some feedback on your bio. That will be time to do that. So I really encourage you to stick around for that last 20 minutes. Even if you are not actively working on a CFP and don't feel like you have a question, being there to support someone else and to provide feedback for them then might get you starting to think, maybe this is what I can start to talk about. So without further ado, I want us to meet our two panelists, speakers, whatever you want to call them, that are here with us today. We have Saaniya from Interaction 21 and Tenessa from Confab and Button. So I'm going to give a warm welcome to both of them. Awesome. And I'd love to get started if y'all want to start off by just sharing a little bit about the event that you're involved with and why you started getting on this side of the event organizing process and call for proposals. Tenessa, do you want to get us started?
Sure. So I have been working with Confab since its first year in 2011. We have done more than 20 confabs in that time. And now this year we're just launching Button. Both conferences are about content strategy. Button is more focused on product folks. And I love programming conferences. It is my absolute favorite part of my job. And I really, really love encouraging folks to apply, even if it's discouraging sometimes when you're not selected. I'm excited to talk about why to apply. So that's me.
Great. Thanks, Tenessa. Saaniya?
Hello, everybody. I'm Saaniya. I'm the co-chair for IXD21. IXD21 is the annual conference by the Interaction Design Association, as we all know it. And it's a huge worldwide community, you're bringing different interaction designers from different disciplines, again, not just pure design, but also looking at design from a broader lens. With Interaction Design 21, our theme this year is Design in Perilous Times, a theme which is like, really, really, really that's apt for this year. for me, I have been more like in the past good number of years involved more as a participant for Interaction Design Association, right? And it has played a major role in my growth as a designer. I really believe that, it's very important if you want to grow as a designer. It's important to be engaged in a community outside the office space. So this year I wanted to be on the other side where I'm actually giving back to the community. So that's how I got involved with IXT 21. And like, Tenessa said, it's very important that, we should be confident in applying to a CFP irrespective, whether, you're selected or not, that's not important. You need to be confident about your point of view. What is it that you want to bring to the table? So I'm happy to be on the call today to encourage all the participants.
Fantastic. Thank you to both of you. I'd love to start off if we can talk a little about the process. I know that that's something that folks are wondering about is what is the process from when folks apply to, how you all select and anything in between that you want to share about the call for proposals process.
You want to start, Saaniya, since I went first?
Sure, sounds good. So with IXT 21, it's a two-step process. So for the first process, we have a peer committee that's actually appointed by the organizing committee. It's a committee with the distinguished individuals from the field of design, and we're making sure that people in committee there's there's diversity in terms of your point of view, the culture, the different design disciplines. So in the first step, this committee is going to be looking through all the submissions through the lens of like relevance to the theme. That's going to be something that is like really critical, and the first criteria we're looking at. Also in terms of how clear your proposal are, this clarity, the quality, persuasiveness in your point of view. That's going to be very, very important. And this year, we've opened up our theme to be like, it's design in perilous times, and we do have sub themes, but we're also saying that, you don't have to stick to the perils that we have specifically mentioned with the call for proposal. If there's a peril that you feel that goes beyond what we've mentioned, be free to apply. So we want to keep it a little open that way. So that's like the first step process. This peer committee will shortlist submissions based on this criteria and through this lens. And then we have our panel, which is the program team and the co-chairs, which will be doing a more deep dive into these shortlisted submissions, right? So looking with the lens of like, what's the story you're trying to tell, the impact that you're trying to bring, what are those key takeaways, or what's very unique about the talk. So that's like the second step where we'll be reviewing those shortlisted submissions, and would want to curate the program from, again, a very global perspective on this topic. So those are like the two-step process for our submission review process.
Yeah, we have some of what we do is similar and some is a little bit different. We typically get 200 to 300 proposals. And so our first wave is actually trying to just get that to be a smaller pile. So we actually remove all identifying information, and we do a blind read where we don't know anything about the person who submitted. We're just looking at the topic, the description, and the learning takeaways. And Christina and I, Christina Helverson is the director of Confab. She and I will both read every single submission and just give it a 1, 2, or 3. And so we end up with our pile of 1s, and we usually end up with a pile of 1, 2s, and then we have our pile of 3s, and then we go back. We don't have a board because we're a company. We're very hands-on with the proposals, but after we've read through and we have our favorites, we still usually have 100 proposals that are fantastic. And so then we start sorting by topic to make sure that we have all of our topics covered. So, I might have a pile of editorial strategy and a pile of UX writing, and I'll have all these different topics broken out. And then we go into those piles and we sort of try to lift up the ones that seem like the strongest within those topic areas. And sometimes there is still much weeping and gnashing of teeth because we might have 10 amazing UX writing talks and we wish we could pick all of them. And at that stage, we always request a video sample. So we don't watch the video sample for all 300, but we do watch a video sample for everyone who's sort of a finalist. And that can sometimes help us understand someone's communication style, help us learn a little bit. And at that point, we learn who they are. And we're trying to represent as many diverse voices as possible. So knowing that people are coming from all different kinds of companies, we want to make sure we have nonprofits represented and higher education and just trying to get the right mix. And it's always, by the end, where, Christina and I are just throwing our heads down on the table and saying we wish we could pick 70 talks. It's a very it's a very brute force sort of effort. But yeah, and then we'll get into like really deep conversations about the top 3, and we'll just have to make a hard decision.
Tenessa, how many do you ultimately choose out of that 300?
Depending on the conference, it's between 25 and 50.
Okay, great. And Saaniya, do you know the numbers of, like, on average, or maybe in the past year, how many people apply, or maybe you expect to apply, and how many you'll be choosing for Interaction 21?
Yes. So usually, like in the past years, the number has been somewhere between like 600 to 800, really depends, right? And the first level of the shortlist, it goes down to like around around 150, 100 to 150 talks, and then from there we break it down. This year, like the format is different, so we're still working on in terms of like what the content model is like in terms of like, this is a 24-hour conference. This year, the number of talks we would shortlist would definitely be different than what it has been in previous years. But definitely, I think for the first round, when we shortlist, we're going to be shortlisting to around 100 and then take it from there.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I know that you shared a little bit about, Saaniya, you mentioned if the proposal aligns with the theme, that's really important. Tenessa, you mentioned that you'll watch the video towards that end and deciding piece. I'd love if you all can share what are some of the most important elements of a proposal. I know that there's a lot of different things included, and I'm sure that they all are important in different ways, but what are the couple of areas within the proposal that you really encourage folks pay particular attention to, or spend the most time in?
So Tenessa, should I go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So I think a couple of things, right? Like one thing I think it's really important is, what is the story that you're trying to tell, right? What is the story? What is the special sauce, or what's really unique about the topic or the presentation of the talk that you want to do? I think that's very critical. The second area is also when I'm looking at in terms of like descriptions, right? So thinking about like having a structure is very critical, because you're communicating it to the reviewers as well. So I think something to think about how you're going to be communicating about your talk. I think it's very important. The third thing I think is about the takeaways for the audience. That's very important. And why do you think it's really important for the audience to hear about your talk? I think really nailing these elements is going to be critical. Video, yes, we do have an option even in our call for proposal in terms of having a video example to understand, like, how do you present, so on and so forth. But I still want to encourage that if you don't feel very confident about your presentation skills, you still need to apply, because with IXD 21, we're making sure we have like speakers, we have the option of speaker training, so on and so forth. So I definitely encourage, like, okay, that's an important part, yes, but it's very important that you still apply irrespective, and we are there to help, if you have a solid talk. So I think those are like some of the key areas I would, encourage people to really pay attention to when they're applying for the call for proposals.
Yeah, I think there's often a misconception that conferences are only looking for experienced speakers. And I know, similarly to what you said, Saaniya, we absolutely prioritize lifting up new voices, and we offer speaker coaching as well. So we're really willing to work with somebody who is like a fresh face who's never given a talk ever in history. That's not actually a high priority for us. We believe lots of people have great things to contribute. As far as what's the most important, definitely the learning takeaways. I think sometimes talks and descriptions are written to be sort of funny, or they're written to be clever in a way that doesn't make it clear what the audience will get from the talk. And so I think people are trying to get noticed, and like, yes, I might think it's really fun to have a slide deck that's centered around Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I need to know, like, why is my audience going to bring this conference to their boss and say, like, I need to go here and learn these things. That's the biggest thing. And the other thing I would say is titles really matter, the talk titles, and they need to be, again, really compelling about what the audience gets, not sort of a strange pun that I don't know what it means. Like I always encourage people, really boring titles are great as long as they say exactly what your talk is. I mean, I will confess I've had funny titles, but only when they are super crystal clear as to what the audience gets. It's because we're reading 300 of them. So to be able to stand out, it's harder to stand out with humor than it is to stand out with compelling content.
That's great. Another question that has come up a lot is, are there specific themes or topics that you want to hear more of? So I know, of course, maybe the conference has a theme, but are there maybe certain topics that you're hoping to be covered, or certain, I know Tenessa, you mentioned like you really love hearing from new speakers and uplifting new voices, especially folks that are thinking of, should I apply, or like, what are the top types of talks that I should be giving? If you have any advice there, what you're looking for.
Go ahead.
I think as much as folks are able to look at, if there is a previous event, like look at the past programs and look for topics that weren't represented, because we're always looking for something new. We're always looking for something that is underrepresented. And so if you see that in one program year, there are, like, we do repeat the same topics every year, but I think, one year we had a lot of demand for like AI talks, and we only got one or two, and so I think we picked both of them. And I think sometimes it doesn't always have to be the most cutting edge take on things, but if you're really paying attention to like this year, if there was something about something sort of, working within the pandemic, obviously like that's new, right? So if there were talks that really talked about the current reality that we're in, or how people are doing their work differently, that would definitely be in demand right now.
So if we step back a bit, so for IXT 21, like the theme is like you mentioned, design in perilous times. Within the bigger theme, we have mentioned like some sub themes, right? Like we have like design economics, dark design, which is something really very new. There's dark design. There's design a new world to design, social injustice. There's quite a bit that's happening there, right? I think the most important thing is that we want people to talk about, like, really address those hard questions, be really provocative, be honest. I mean, those are the kind of talks that we are really seeking. At this point, we have also, like within the IXT 21 team, there was a discussion about like, how do we make it comfortable for speakers, potential speakers who want to talk about topics that could be like delicate or controversial, right? Like we started even thinking about that aspect. So we have this a provision where people can present anonymously as well. So you can apply anonymously, and you have the option to present anonymously as well. And of course, we'll fact check, we'll vet all those things really well, following the Canadian laws of journalism. But I'm just saying that what we're really looking for is answering those hard questions and trying to make sure that if there are people who want to talk about topics that are considered taboo in the industry, we are having a provision for that. So yeah, that's how I would like put it in a nutshell, like what we're looking for. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Thank you both. One of the questions that came up in the chat, we had lots of good ones. So I'm going to start asking from some of those, and y'all can keep asking questions in the chat. Someone mentioned that when they apply for a CFP, it kind of feels like applying for a job or a contract, and they send it out into the internet and it never seems to go anywhere. There was no human response. And how do they make their submission really count?
That keeps me up at night, honestly. In the past, I've tried to tell folks when are my less busy time, like right after the call for proposals, I'm just so booked that it's hard for me to respond. And even now, it's really hard if even 20 people are looking for feedback on their proposals. It's hard to fit in a personal response. I think asking peers to read before you submit and after, I think sometimes you can sort of tell that maybe someone else had a really similar topic. And sometimes we run into things where we would love to pick a talk but we had already invited someone early, you know, somebody was lined up in advance. And, you know, it's hard. It's hard to get conference organizers to give you personal feedback. I think it never hurts to ask. I'm never sorry someone asks. But I think it's probably more likely to get feedback from peers just about, you know, what would you do differently next time? It's not a very satisfying answer, but it's a very honest one.
Yes. So Danielle, I just want to make sure I understood your question correctly there. So do you mean that people feel that it feels like doing a job application and not really hearing a response from us? Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah, well, and I think that when people, a lot of the times when you apply for a job, like you send it out and you may never hear back from the company. And so I've heard mixed things from folks with the proposal process. Sometimes they'll get a form response that says no. Sometimes they might not even hear back. You know, sometimes, you know, there's like a mix, I guess, of whether or not you know when you're going to hear back, what you hear back, and then if you hear back no, how to keep improving. So I know Tenessa shared, you know, maybe she can't give you the direct feedback all the time, but asking peers. But that is another question that came up too, is, you know, I've gotten 2 rejections so far. Should I keep applying or should I try to get feedback or should I give up? So I think folks are trying to figure out like, what can I expect? And then what do I do when I hear no?
So I'll answer your first question, right? So yes, so once you submit, like with IXD21, like once you submit your proposal, you get automated responses. Of course, it's not like personal responses, but I think that's the reason why we have like these like deadlines or dates that are like set, where we say, okay, by this time we'll get back to you and let you know if you're selected versus not. This is the time we will actually like make it public. So we're trying to do that in terms of like response. When it comes to like feedback, yes, I mean, there is, we don't really have a provision where we're providing feedback saying that if you know, if your proposal is not accepted, why it is not. There isn't any provision yet for that, like, to be really honest. And in terms of, yes, the second question where you spoke, because this makes me think, right, that is it really even possible if we have like so many submissions to really personalize feedback? That's something to think about. I don't have an answer, just like Tenessa mentioned. But for the second one, where you spoke a question where you said like, if you're getting rejections, you still keep applying. Yes, but you should also make sure, like how Tenessa mentioned, that, you know, you have some feedback from your peers, not to understand as to why is it getting rejected, but to understand that what is it that you can make better. I would always take like a positive approach, like that's the eternal optimist I am. But that's how I would approach it. Like, what are those things that you can improve or make better, so that, you know, it works well for you. And I think it's not more about like selection or rejection. It's also about like, if there's a specific topic that you're looking at, how are you catering to the theme of the conference? I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So I wouldn't call it like a rejection. It goes more back to how does it really fit with what you're trying to present and what the conference is trying to bring to the audience. Yeah, that's how I would, you know, pitch it.
And I'd like to add, it's really not rejection. I mean, there are so many times we will say we could program 10 conferences with the quality of proposals we get. It really is almost like a lottery sometimes. And if you happen to pitch the only talk about a topic that's in demand, you win. And if 12 people pitched on the same topic, it was, you know, the luck of the draw more. So I always tell people, please keep submitting. You never know when it's going to be your time. I know it can be really discouraging, but I've had folks who, you know, submitted for 5 years before they got picked, and they had wild success on the stage. So I always encourage or / beg people to keep submitting.
And to add to that, Tenessa, I think that's the reason why I think one of the key elements that I was even talking about is that you need to tell us that what is so unique about your talk. What is that special sauce? I think that's one of the most critical ingredients in the call for proposal, and that's what makes you stand apart. Like how you mentioned, Tenessa, if you have like 10 people who have applied for a similar topic, right? Apart from like, again, like experience may not be the, you know, the measure of like selection. It could definitely be like, what's that special sauce, that ingredient that you're bringing to the table, and for the audience as well. I think that's very, very important.
That's a great a great kind of add on to that. And one of the follow-up questions I have, because I hear this a lot from especially new speakers, is that's sometimes the imposter syndrome can creep in and think like, well, I don't know what makes me completely unique, or what if my special sauce is not special enough? And so I'm curious, how do you recommend folks, especially maybe folks that are newer to speaking or maybe even newer to the industry, think about what is the unique perspective that they can offer on a topic?
One thing that I think really helps folks stand out is, so like, yes, we want to have a really strong program with learning takeaways, but we're also really conscious of the fact that we're building a community, and we're really careful about who we add to that community and whose voice we lift up. So if we can get a sense of what it will be like to have you there, I think if you can get a little bit of your personality into it. I know I said the thing about not writing funny titles, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be hilarious, but I think if there's something about, if you are a little bit, like if you have a perspective, if you have an axe to grind, for example, and that's in one of your like kind of like a pet peeve or something, that can be a way to stand out. And I think even in your bio, sometimes, when you're writing that bio, that's a chance to just show a little bit of your personality, because we're really careful about who we bring into our community to keep it inclusive, keep it diverse, keep it really welcoming, because we always have lots of new people at the conference. So I think adding yourself into the proposal is definitely worth doing.
Absolutely, and I really agree with that. And I think one more piece of information to add to it is also like you mentioned about people who are very, very new to this whole process of call for proposal, or are maybe more junior or underrepresented. Like, there are like these different things that you could consider, these different parameters. I would definitely also think about how you could reflect your point of view, or if there's like a personal perspective about the topic you want to talk about within your bio, right? That could, it doesn't have, again, that could be your special sauce, and I'm using that term again. But that could be, that could be your thing. So I think that's another thing that you think about, like having like, and that's where like sort of persuasiveness also comes in, right? Within your talk, within your approach, your POV. So I would definitely think about that as well.
Great. A question came up about when y'all are narrowing down the list of speakers, do you ever give the top speaker proposals that weren't selected other opportunities? And maybe it's to be interviewed or write a blog post, or do something, maybe that's a smaller type of speaking engagement that's outside the main conference stage.
We do. Christina Halverson hosts a podcast, and so all the people we don't pick for the conference go directly into a pile for a potential podcast guest, because we do want to hear all of those ideas. And sometimes if we have someone who maybe their video submission wasn't super strong, but we see some potential there, and they didn't make the final cut, but we at our in-person events, we always host lightning talks, and those are only 5 minutes long, and that's a way for somebody to sort of dip their toe in the water without having to commit to a full conference talk. And we've had a lot of folks who have started out as lightning talk speakers, then they go on to be breakout speakers, then they go on to be main stage speakers, and they go on to develop workshops. So we really try to shepherd folks along that path of growth.
This year we're having like the new formats that we're introducing in the form of one-on-one mentorship and roundtable. So there is an opportunity that if you're not selected for talks, if you have opted for saying one-on-one mentorship or roundtable sessions, definitely that's where you could find yourself being a part of IXT 21 when it comes to presentation or sharing your knowledge. So those are the two key areas, and I'm really excited about it because again, we know now it's not in person, it's online, but online has its advantages too. It does open up more avenues, and we're trying to make full use of that. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love hearing that y'all have other avenues for speakers to have their voices shared, even if it's not on the main conference stage right away, as Tenessa would say. You can always later on. There are a couple questions came up around workshops, and I'm curious if y'all's events have workshops as an option, if that also goes through the same proposal process, and if you have any advice on what to include or what you all look for when it comes to selecting workshop proposals.
We do have workshops, and we haven't been doing them this year at our virtual events. We may or may not add them in the future for virtual events, but our in-person conferences, we do have workshops. I will say that we no longer give workshop slots to inexperienced speakers. That's the one kind of presentation that, and we used to, and we had enough folks who just really struggled with the format. I think teaching in more of a classroom setting with hands-on exercises does take a little bit of time to develop that skill. So like I said, we'll kind of build people up to where we think they're ready for a workshop. They don't have to have experience speaking at conferences. You know, some folks teach college classes, some folks do other kinds of training, but having that ability to do the hands-on exercises is pretty important. And if you have a workshop that sounds like a lecture, that even if you are experienced, that would be kind of a red flag for us.
Definitely, I think similar to what you said, I think I'm going to just add a couple of things. So definitely the criteria you mentioned, Tenessa, but so with IXT21, we have like 2 different duration workshops that we're offering. It's 2 hours workshop and 4 hours workshop. Apart from, like you mentioned, like the hands-on skill and the experience, it's also going to be important. I know we hopped a lot on the takeaways, but even with the workshops, right? What are we really, what is the audience really taking away? Is it like a unique set of skills, or tools, or a design philosophy? What is it that they're going to be taking away? And of course, it has to be within the realm of the theme that we are looking at. So yes, I think that's pretty much when it comes to workshops. And again, like this year it's going to be online, so we're going to make sure that that the facilitators of the workshops are pretty comfortable with using the platform, provide the right tools that they need. I mean, we want to make sure all those things are taken care of. So again, you don't want anybody to hold back and say, oh, I've never done an online workshop. Well, that's what we're going to be helping you with that. But again, the content and the experience is yours.
Great. Now we have a couple more minutes for questions. So if you want to drop your question in the chat, if you asked it earlier and I missed it, feel free to put it back in. I was trying to go through it and read through everyone's. I know there are a couple questions on crafting your bio, and I'd love to see if you all have any advice on, someone asked like how important is your job title or company, but also if you just have tips for how someone should talk about themselves or sell themselves in their bio for the proposal.
I mean, the bios are not a deciding factor usually. Someone's perspective sometimes is, so it does matter what your job title is and your company, but it doesn't, for us at least, that doesn't always mean like you need to be at the biggest name, fanciest company with the highest title. For us, we're really looking at putting together a mix of people. And so I think whoever you are, I mean, we put people on the stage from companies we've never heard of because they have great ideas, and we want both. We do try to feature big companies, who are known for things. So for example, if somebody from Netflix pitches on personalization like that, they have a really good personalization engine. So that's an example of where that would matter. But I will also get just as excited about somebody who's like a real rabble rouser at a nonprofit who's, got some stellar newsletter program that's getting amazing numbers. Like that's just as exciting to me.
To add to that, I think definitely it's not just about like what we look at, what I personally am going to be, and the whole team, I think we are looking at for the bios. Like I mentioned, one of the things is like, how does your experience match to the topic that you're trying to talk about? That is like the key. Of course, I would love to know that, what you're doing professionally. And like Tenessa pointed out, like, okay, if there's a topic you're talking about, it's something that you're already working on within a company, that's great. But again, it's that whole relation and the link to the topic in your bio, I think it's very, very, very important. And also what helps is like in terms of having, if you're looking at a global perspective for us to bring a program, it helps us to know, okay, the title is not important, but just for us to understand that, okay, that, you know, okay, this is a perspective from somebody who's entering into the field versus a perspective from somebody who's very experienced, right? I mean, that's where we would like really want to know what your experience level is. But apart from that, it's more about your link and to the topic you want to talk about, is what I would say.
That's
what we look at.
That's a great point.
Yeah, great. And there are a couple of people who asked about different formats or maybe the side opportunities that y'all were talking about before, Saaniya, when you mentioned the one-on-one mentor hours or different formats that you're doing. Is that something that people can specifically like pitch in their proposal? Is there room for that to say like, I'm interested in an interview? Or I guess on the other side too, someone asked like, can they actually pitch a different format that's not listed? So if they wanted to interview someone or have a panel, I know that's kind of two different questions, but I guess one is there a way to indicate interest in doing other things outside of what you're talking about? And then the other is, do you accept other formats outside of what you've outlined?
I think we are pretty open at this point. So definitely yes. So you can use the same submission form that we have and specify that what is the different format you're looking at. And if it feels like, okay, yeah, that's going to bring something different to the table, then why not? I think we want to be pretty open at this point. And similarly, like if there's something specific to for one-on-one mentorship, of course, people can pitch about, right? These are my, you know, areas of interest, is what I've been doing. Again, like I said, it's pretty open. So we will review and see how it works, fits in well within this whole piece of IXD 21 and get back. So yes, feel free.
Yeah, we've actually removed from our proposal form any indicator about what kind of programming it is. We're just looking for topic. And we always have a field at the end of our call for speakers, which opens tomorrow, by the way. We have a field at the end where we say, is there anything else you want us to know? Because we love collaborating with people on new ideas, and especially, you know, making virtual conferences is such a different animal from in-person conferences. I mean, we're really hosting a 3-day television show now, and we're wide open. I mean, we've been having interesting contests, and we've been having one-on-one fireside chats, and there are all kinds of things that we're doing differently during virtual times that, like, we need creativity from the community. I would absolutely encourage people to chime in with those ideas.
Great. We're going to start to wrap up the questions, and then we're going to move into breakout rooms. One of the questions that I wanted to bring up that someone just asked is if you have a favorite talk that has come through in the past. And so, Saaniya, I know that you've attended the conference as a participant, and so maybe you can share from that perspective, and Tenessa from the reviewing and choosing perspective, if you have a favorite talk or proposal that's come through.
You want to start, Saaniya?
You go ahead.
So I have done so many conferences. I've read so many proposals. I will say that my favorite way that a speaker got selected, which is not exactly the same as what the topic was, James Gunther, several years ago, his video proposal was, or his talk proposal was about SEO, and it was a really good, strong proposal. But the reason we picked him was because his video sample was a video of him teaching how to make fried plantains. And the reason, he demonstrated that he knew how to teach. He was himself. We got a real good sense of like what kind of a person he was. He did something that was memorable. I'm still talking about these fried plantains years later. So I will say that the people who pop into my mind as like having sort of won the proposal prize, like the trophy, are the ones who are able to give us that feeling of like, oh, I'm so happy this person's going to be at our conference. I'm so happy that our audience gets to learn from this person.
Cool. So Danielle, I think instead of like being more on is more than giving an example in terms of the participants that I did. I think in 2019 IXD 19, there was an open call in terms of even reviewing submissions, and I can share a quick experience on that front. I think if I like step back a bit, if you think about the call for proposals when you're reviewing like a being more on the reviewer side when you're having like a bunch of like 50 to 60 that you're looking at. One of the things that really worked well for me was when there was more clarity in terms of how the proposal was communicated about. So there are times when people, this is something more in terms of like the technical jargon that's used in descriptions, and I'm going a little more detailed. But for me, when I'm reviewing call for proposals, if it's like very clear in terms of language, that kind of really stands out to me rather than it being more in terms of like a technical jargon and going too superfluous with language, because there are times when people feel that using that, that kind of description may make the call for proposal stand out. So I've had experiences where it's pretty simple, straightforward, and very clear and concise. And those are the kind of proposals that have actually made it to the next round and eventually even for IXD 21 talks, right? So I think that's the part of the experience I would want to share for this question. Because I went a little blank when you asked me for an example. There are like so many talks I've attended. But yeah.
No, that's great. That's great advice. And, as I mentioned, I want us to save the last little bit of time to give you all an opportunity to chat with one another and be able to ask each other questions around where you are in the proposal process, if you're looking for feedback, to be able to get that from your peers. And so I'm going to encourage you all to stick around. We're going to go into breakout rooms for about 12 minutes and then come back. I have some prompts that I'm going to share. But first, I want to say thank you so much to Tenessa and Saaniya for sharing all your experience and advice. Very grateful for that. As was mentioned, the interaction proposal closes this Friday, so you still have time to get that in. And Confab opens tomorrow, it sounds like, which is really exciting. So I dropped those links in the chat. I'm also going to send a follow-up message, and we really do want to hear your voice. And so I hope that you will take the advice of our guests today and apply and keep applying, because we want to hear from you. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to drop some questions in the chat to guide y'all when you break out in your rooms. So this will be here when you go. If you haven't used breakout rooms before, what's going to happen is it's going to look like Zoom is shutting down. Instead, it's going to push you over to another room, and you'll be in a small group where you can start to share, what topics you're working on, where you're looking for feedback from that. It can be really helpful as we were sharing to get feedback from your peers. I'll bring everyone back when there is about 2 minutes left so that we can wrap up. And if you need anything too, you can always come back in the meantime. So I'm going to open up these rooms really quick. And all right, the rooms are open. So you should be sent over there, and then we'll see you in just a bit. If anyone doesn't get an invite, let me know and I will make sure to. Let's see. If anyone's still here and they didn't get an invite and wants one, please let me know.